The story of my stepmother, Abigail Becker, is the one of kindness, resilience, and courage, as the most heroic actions are often performed by unremarkable, ordinary people, oftentimes of very humble origin. Abigail was only 17 when she married my father, who was immediately attracted to her kind and self-sacrificial nature. Father was a widower, so with him came an instant family of 5 boys and a girl, me. Abigail was to add to it by bearing him 3 girls and 5 boys. Since father spent so much of his time on Long Point, he decided to build a home there. In the lee of the Fortune, a mile or so west of Courtwright Ridge and what came to be known as the Breakwater, he built a rough cabin from the lumber that lay strewn along the beach. Abigail loved this home among the dunes and had no fears of the isolation or of the winter storms that would often prevent father from returning from his day's trapping or from the trips he made periodically into Port Rowan to barter his pelts for supplies. No mother was ever more truly good to her children than our stepmother was to myself and the others. However, living by the sea, we knew it could be very treacherous. At one time, just after we moved to the point, father and 2 of the boys took the sailboat and went over to Port Rowan. There was a heavy storm came up, and they could not get away for a number of days. I never knew mother to get so uneasy as at this time. She feared they had sunk to the bottom of the bay. They had gone to obtain provisions, for we were nearly out of eatables. There was a rowboat in the water, about half a mile out in the marsh. She said, "I will wade out and get that boat." This she did, wading, until the water came up to her arms. She got the boat and tied it to the landing. She intended the next morning to row to Port Rowan, a distance of 7 miles, but, fortunately, just as the sun was setting, we saw them coming. The autumn of 1854 had been mild and comparatively storm-free. The morning of November 24th was bright. Father loaded his skiff early and set out for Port Rowan. Abigail, sensing impending trouble, suggested he wait another day, fearing for his safety crossing the inner bay, if the wind, which seemed already to be freshening, should catch him on the open waters. Laughing at her concern, he agreed to hug the marshes on his way in. When mother turned to look across the marshes, she could see that the inner bay had rolling whitecaps too. Mother's fear was justified. The previous day the 3-masted schooner Conductor had taken on the last of 1,000 bushels of wheat in Amherstburg Harbor. Captain Robert Hackett had sensed an impending storm, but he had insisted on sailing immediately because he knew that few days of good weather remained to him, and he feared being unable to deliver his cargo to Toronto. He also felt that he could make the Long Point cut before the storm had gathered sufficient force to be a threat, and, if necessary, he could ride it out in the comparative safety of the inner bay. By dusk of November 24th, the wind was strong, the schooner was scudding along under close-reefed sails, and Captain Hackett was forced to rely on dead reckoning for his position as the combination of driving snow and a moonless night gave him little opportunity of sighting the old cut lightship or familiar landmarks ashore. Deceived by the snow and howling wind, about midnight the Conductor struck the outer bar a half-mile off the south beach. The breakers lifted her clear, but she then swung to port and luffed up into the wind to crash broadside into the second bar and heel over. Taking on water as one mountainous sea followed another over her decks, she quickly sank until her decks were awash. The crew could do nothing but scramble for safety into the rigging, where they lashed themselves to the masts and prayed that their ship would not break up before daylight. Their yawl boat had been torn clear of the chocks and davits, and they realized their only hope would be to swim ashore in the daylight. They also knew that any chance of survival in those sand-filled, angry breakers and the treacherous undertow they created was minimal. Mother was astir early following a restless night. She built up the kitchen fire for breakfast before going down to the beach for a bucket of water. As she cleared the Fortune, she saw the yawl boat of the Conductor in the pounding surf. No seamen were to be found, but with a sinking heart she hurried along the beach. Soon she saw the 8 forms huddled in the rigging. She waved frantically and, with a feeling of relief, observed an answering wave from 1 or 2 of the men. She came back to the house at once and said, "Children, there is a vessel ashore about a mile up the beach. Edward, you go and see if we can help them." He went, and on returning said, "If they cannot get to shore they will all perish." She said, "I will go up behind the sand hills and see what condition they are in." When she got opposite them she went to the top of the hill. She saw the men in a suffering condition, clinging to the rigging. Returning she said, "We will go down on the beach at once and see if they will come ashore." The sailors saw her combing down the bill and gave a cheer, and said to one another, "If we can get to shore we shall be all right, for there must be a family living on the island." She and the little boys built a fire on the beach and put water to heat for making tea. She beckoned for them to come ashore and signaled that she would help them out. The men were stiffened and half helpless with the cold. Kicking off his boots and throwing his greatcoat ahead of him, he called out, "If I make shore successfully the rest of you follow, one at a time." The captain plunged in and started swimming strongly towards shore. But as the sea threw him forward, his mouth and eyes filled with sand. He struggled to gain a secure footing in the shifting sands, but his strength failed and the undertow began to carry him back. Then Abigail dashed in to catch the collar of his coat. Half carrying him, she struggled shoreward and laid the semi-conscious man by the fire. She poured a mug of tea for him, before returning to the beach to encourage the next man to swim through. Realizing that time was precious, the mate, Jerome, swung clear on a halyard to lower himself in the lee of the schooner's hull. He fared well, too, until the treacherous undertow swept his feet from under him. Like his captain, weakened by exposure and cold, he began to be swept out into deep water. Captain Hackett, in spite of Mother's protests, dashed to Jerome's rescue, only to suffer the same fate. As the mate clutched him in the fatal embrace of a drowning man, it appeared they both would be carried off, but with a superhuman effort, Abigail grabbed an arm of each and dragged the 2 half-drowned men out of the reach of the undertow. Edward, my brother, who was lame and walking with crutches, wanted to help, and came to his mother's assistance, but the sea was so heavy that he could not stand, and she had to get both him and another sailor out of the water. One by one, 5 more seamen plunged from the rigging into the icy waters of the lake, and one by one Abigail met them as they struggled against the returning waters of each succeeding wave and brought them safely to her fire. It was a long, nerve-wracking day for all of them. Having given her shoes to one of the men, whose feet were frostbitten, Mother moved among the men and into the surf in bare feet. It was bitter cold, and her clothing, like the sailors stranded aloft, was soon encased in ice, but she worked on tirelessly. Finally, all but the unfortunate ship's cook were safely ashore. He could not swim and chose to remain in the rigging of the foundered ship. As the storm raged with unabated fury, his shipmates agreed, nothing could be done for him. The short winter day was almost spent and the group moved from the beach fire to the cabin. She took her shawl and shoes and put them on the men one at a time, till she got them all to the house, where I and my younger brothers had a good fire in the large, old-fashioned fireplace. I remember being interested in the men, standing around the fire drying their clothes and their paper money. But the poor cook of the conductor had to hang in the rigging all night as he could not swim. The next morning Mother got up early and rushed to the beach. The sea had gone down somewhat. The men made a raft out of the boards that were about, and put out to the wreck. There still were evidences of life in him. The poor fellow had lashed himself to the rigging. Otherwise the waves would have washed him away. He was able afterwards to tell of the awfulness of his feelings, when he saw his 7 comrades rescued and himself left to pass another night in his position of helplessness and apparently to die. He was brought to the house, and Mother put his frozen feet in cold water to draw out the frost. It was some weeks before he could get around. The men were very grateful for what had been done for them. The captain remarked to Mother that it was a good work she had done that day, for not one of them was prepared to die. Not long before the incident with Conductor, another schooner had foundered in the sandbars of the South Beach. The crew were taken off safely except for the cook. She had been in her cabin below decks during the storm, and it was assumed that in the excitement, the unfortunate woman had been washed overboard before anyone even saw her come on deck. The ship settled into the offshore shoals, providing a supply of clean, fresh water within its hold. As the wreck lay just off the beach opposite our cabin, it offered a ready source of sweet water for our family, more convenient than that we usually used. One morning Abigail sent one of my sisters with a bucket on a line to dip water from the ship's hold. She soon came, running back, calling, "Mother, Mother, there is a woman in the schooner and she is waving to me." Abigail went to investigate. Through an open hatch, the watery beams of a winter sun sent green shafts of light through the black and quiet water. As her eyes gradually became accustomed to the darkness, she could see first the white but serene face of a woman, then a halo of hair moving gently as the ship rocked under the impact of each succeeding wave, and finally the wraith-like outline of a woman floating with outstretched arms. Obviously the cook had never left her bunk when the ship foundered. Now, months later, her body, which had been preserved by the cold water, had floated free to appear as if beckoning from the hold. The experience did not upset Mother unduly, for our family remained in the cabin among the dunes, to the great good fortune of the Conductor shipwrecked crew. In autumn nature donned a magnificent tapestry of colors, with the lush forests and winding trails transforming into a vibrant display of reds, oranges, and yellows. The air carried a crisp, invigorating chill, and the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of cozy evenings by the fire filled the atmosphere. As the weeks passed, the temperature gradually plummeted, and the landscape underwent a remarkable shift. A blanket of pristine snow began to cover the ground, muffling the sounds of nature and lending a serene, otherworldly quality to the surroundings. There was an iron-laden vessel wrecked on Long Point Island, near the lower lighthouse, the crew of 6 escaping to land. On reaching the lighthouse they found the keeper had gone for the winter to the mainland. As they were starving, they broke into the kitchen, and finding a few frozen potatoes they devoured them and searched for more food, but found none until they reached our place. Only 4 of the 6 succeeded in walking to our place, the other 2 gave up about 1.5 miles away. Mother invited the 4 in to warm up by the fire, and then set off in the snowstorm with 2 of my brothers and some warm clothing, to find the other survivors. Miraculously, despite the severity of the storm and resulting limited visibility, she was able to locate the 2 and coerce them to get up and go on, practically pushing them back to our cabin. All of the sailors survived. The next morning, when Father returned, the men were taken safely to the mainland. The Buffalo merchants and sailors made up a sum of money $550 and put it in the hands of the customs officer of Port Rowan at the time. She wished with the money to buy herself a little home. She decided on 50 acres, east of the center road of North Walsingham. The place is cut up with Big Creek and a number of large gullies. I see from the papers, it is stated she received $1,000 with which to stock the farm. If any such sum was ever raised, she never got it. When she wanted the $550 with which to buy the 50 acres, she had to go to law in order to get it, and then only received $535. The remainder of the money for the purchase she had to furnish herself. Mother loved the farm and worked hard to feed and clothe us. Seeing there were so many mouths in our family, I decided to go out for work, although it was against Mother's wish. I couldn't have ever asked for a better mother than my stepmother was to me. When we moved on the farm, we had 2 cows and a yoke of oxen. One of the cows drank sour sap and died, and the other was killed by a tree falling upon it while browsing in the woods. Mother wove and spun to get money for another cow. Father, having nothing to farm with, got discouraged and thought he could earn more at hunting on the point. It was winter when he went over there, and after only a few days a heavy storm came up. He was obliged to leave his shanty. He seems to have hoisted his trunk upon the roof where it was found, and a part of his clothing frozen to it, as if he had been sitting upon it. Afterwards, he had apparently tried to make his way to another shanty some 3 miles distant. He had gone about 2 miles when he seems to have sat down on a log and frozen to death. His body was not found for nearly 3 months. One of her sons drowned in Port Rowan Bay. His body was never found. It has always seemed sad to me that she saved others but her own were lost. She and her small boys had to do the farm work, yoke the oxen, get ready the year's wood, plant and dig potatoes, and do other things about a farm. One time she tended 10 acres of corn for a neighbor, besides doing washing and other hard work. We are, you may be sure, proud of her. 3 years after my father's death, Mother married again, and had 3 more daughters. She really raised 3 families, 17 children in all. Mother is proud of the gold medal she received from the American Humane Association, and also of a letter received not very long ago from our last Governor General and Queen Victoria's letter. Before the Long Point incident, Mother saved a child from drowning in a well, and a man from a similar fate at Nanticoke, by throwing him a plank and holding him up till assistance came. When you find yourself in a desperate situation, please, don't think it's all over, for there might be angels sent to rescue us. Thank you for watching.